everybody, and welcome back to Early Childhood Chats. Andy Roszak with you as always. And continuing on, we've got a very special topic we've been diving into. This is now part 3 of our series, the third and final portion. We've been looking at vehicles hitting buildings, vehicles hitting playgrounds, vehicles hitting things that, gosh, we wish they wouldn't. But obviously, you can imagine the impacts that this would have in the early childhood sector if we do have cars that jump the curbs and hit our playgrounds or hit our buildings, or worse yet, even go through our playgrounds or through our buildings. So if you've been following along with us on this very important series, you know this is our third episode. The first episode, we had Rob with us to really talk about the scope and the scale of this problem. And as you may recall, he had some great data and saying that, on average, vehicles are hitting buildings about 100 times a day. And as we mentioned, early childhood facilities are not immune from that. So we're really taking a close look to see, what's causing this, what can we do to intervene and try to prevent this, and then even what can we do to harden our facilities so if this does happen, the impact is, not grave or people aren't injured or heaven forbid, killed. So that was Rob on episode 1, and John came in episode 2. We talked a lot about safety assessments and what that looks like, simple ways to, manage this and mitigate this through traffic flow and other devices. And today we're really going to kind of talk to the expert here. We're going to talk to Ken, who really is going to think about all the other things that can come into place, right? What are the physical barriers that we can put up? What do those look like? Or some are good, some are not so good. But he's going to talk us through all those types of barriers that are really in place to help protect our programs and, of course, our children. So Ken is coming to us from Chicago, Illinois, my hometown. So it's great to be in touch with Ken again. I am jealous. He's probably got pizza there in the background or something he's eating. But Ken has spent pretty much his whole professional adult life in construction, in the trades, doing this work day in and day out. And we're just so happy that you're joining us today. So please, Ken, say hi to folks. Tell them about yourself and all the wonderful things you've been up to.
Hey, Andy, how you doing? Thanks for having me. I'm Chicago through and through, born and raised here. Came from some conservative parents. They said that the arts in New York were not going to pay the bills and be able to provide for a family. So I had to take my creative juices elsewhere and decided to focus on construction. And started out at age 14 at my cousin's local construction company in the Chicagoland area here that was very well established. And I spent many a weekend and holidays and summers and time off during my high school and college days, learning the trades on site, doing the physical labor, and continuing to get my craft in a better place. I basically, anything that I have managed, I pretty much have done the actual work. So it makes for relationships with contractors in the field much easier because I understand what they're going through. I actually have done most of the work that I've managed over the years. I've done a lot of framing and concrete work and interior and exterior finishes and woodwork. Built some custom homes in the western suburbs of Chicago. I've spent well over a decade in facility management, and I'd say the majority of my career has been spent in the last couple of decades on managing commercial construction projects throughout the country. Some programs I've worked on are 7-Eleven, Walgreens, fast food chains like Raising Cane's and Applebee's, daycare centers, etc. Most all of my work has been with national retailers and facilities across the U.S.
Well, a phenomenal background, and I appreciate you being here and being able to walk us through some of this. I kind of got my first crash course in building construction as a firefighter because not that I was in the trades, but I just kind of needed to know how things were put together. So if they were burning, we knew how to find the fire, extinguish the fire, all that kind of good stuff.
Yep.
So definitely, I don't know nearly as much as you, but I just find it fascinating how actually buildings are built and constructed and kind of what's behind the drywall that we see in our homes. So I thought if it would be okay, Ken, I'd kind of start off with maybe some misconceptions that you hear all the time, right? And one of those things I think we've even heard in the last couple episodes, just my building is safe. I don't need to do anything further, or my playground is safe. I have a fence that's going to keep the kids in, that's going to keep vehicles out. And I'm sure you probably hear this, why do I need to reinforce things? Why do I need to build new things? Why do I need to do this when my building's going to keep vehicles out, and the fence around my playground is going to keep cars out? Misconception, true, false? What do you think?
Well, I recently had a conversation with a large daycare facility, and I was discussing with them one of their um, larger facilities that had extremely large number of traffic that comes through in terms of vehicles on a daily basis. And the way that their building and their parking lot was set up, it was one of those half circle roundabouts that comes around in front of the school for drop-offs and pickups. And as I'm trying to explain to the program director the amount of exposure his building and his students and staff had to these daily traffic, the response was, "We have very solid drop off and pickup. We have very solid drop off and pickup rules in place for our parents and for our staff and for how our children are brought in and out of the school." And I was trying to explain it. It's good you've got the rules on how everyone's supposed to get dropped off and picked up and come out of the building and go into the building, but you're not addressing the fact that you're talking about 50 students enroll in your daycare or your school. You're talking about 100 vehicles a day, 500 a week, 2,000 a month coming through your parking lot. And we're not talking about a bicycle. We're talking about 3, 4, 5,000 pound vehicles, with the size of some of the trucks and the weight of some of these electrical vehicles today coming through these facility parking lots. And you can have all the protocols in place that you want. It's not going to stop someone accidentally hitting the gas and running through a building. So it can get frustrating in trying to talk to some of these places, because they get so highly focused on they've got rules and protocol in place, but they don't have the actual protection in place.
Yeah, and for folks who are kind of unaware, I mean, what is the typical, framing look like? I mean, kind of behind these walls, we've got studs and those kind of things. I mean, is that really engineered? Is that really built to
No,
withstand a
and
car
that's
impact?
another misconception. I mean, if you look at, you look at a lot of these crashes across the United States, these vehicles are going right through brick walls. It doesn't matter if you've got a brick facade. That that doesn't stop a 5,000 pound vehicle from 25, 30 miles an hour hitting that brick wall. It goes right through. And Google any accidents throughout the U.S. where you've had a vehicle and a brick wall involved, and you'll see a lot of those vehicles went far beyond the brick wall into the facility.
Well, and I'm assuming in the same vein, like if the building itself is not going to protect us, what about playground fences? I can't imagine they're going to give us much protection.
No, they do absolutely nothing. They're no better than a brick wall. Um, Most of these playground accidents that I've seen and experienced, uh, when you're talking about an accident in a vehicle going 25, 30, 35 miles an hour, some of them more, the fence doesn't even remotely stop the penetration and the speed at which the vehicle is going.
Well, it's certainly a good point to remember, because again, we don't want people to be lulled into a false sense of security here. We want to be open and honest with folks, and um, most of those fences, especially chain link, I don't know. You again, you know better than me. I put one in years ago, and quite frankly, I didn't want to dig, right? It's hard. So
Yeah,
I dig as little as possible. I put, I don't know, half a bag of concrete in there and kind of called it a day. But I was doing it to keep the dogs in the yard. I wasn't doing it to try to stop a, 6,000 pound Tesla or something coming at me, right?
right. There's some relatively inexpensive barriers on the market that, you get an awful lot of these places, whether it be uh, um, whether it be the facility itself that doesn't want a guardrail or the visual appearance of something like a guardrail across the front of their fencing, or if there's any restrictions in terms of landscaping within a municipality. There are other barriers. There's a cable barrier system that pretty much, it's not real visible from a distance and provides a substantial amount of safety for cars going up to 30, 40, 50 miles an hour. It basically, you can go up to about a 120-foot span with some of these cable barrier systems between the support posts and keep a vehicle when it does hit those cables. Um, I've seen a lot of them are usually about a 8 to 12 foot penetration. So you're talking about substantial protection without creating a lot of unsightly visuals around something like a playground.
Is that kind of what we've started to see on some of the highways that are out there, Ken? Kind of that stuff that prevents you from crossing over into the median and into the oncoming traffic? Is
It
that
acts
kind
very
of the same thing?
similar to
Okay.
those. Now those are designed to take impact an angle more than a head on.
Okay.
And so some of the barriers and companies that I've dealt with recently have actually done testing on their cable barrier systems for head-on collision.
Hmm.
So it's their system with their posts and their end posts set up with the cables stretched between them and head-on 3, 4, 5,000 pound vehicles going X miles an hour, hitting that cable, and then coming up with what a penetration might be with that particular system. Because unlike the highways, a lot of these facilities and these parking lots, you've got pull pull in parking, head in parking, and cars aiming straight at something like a playground rather than coming at it from an angle.
Yeah, I suppose from an engineering standpoint, the glancing blow, if you think about going down a freeway parallel, right? I
Yes,
suppose a glancing blow where we kind of bump you on the side and redirect you is probably a bit different than a head on, as you're
right,
kind of talking about for sure.
right.
I thought maybe it would be helpful to start maybe kind of on the low end. Obviously, look, everybody in early childhood, we're not in this for the money. At least many of us aren't.
Yeah,
So there's not a tremendous amount of millionaires walking around. And of course, I think everybody wants to be safe, but everybody also has, budget considerations and restraints, and even some of the stuff that, you've already brought up. I mean, it may be a zoning thing. It may be a landlord tenant relationship. It may just be there's restrictions on what we can do. And we also don't want to, turn it into a Fort Knox or a jail or something that doesn't look appealing from the curb, because we do want the
right.
facilities to look opening and welcoming and all that kind of stuff. So maybe if you don't mind, we could start kind of thinking about environmental barriers. And I'd love to get your take on, programs saying, okay, well, if I need to put up a barrier, I'm going to put some rocks down, or I'm going to put some boulders down, or I'm going to, I don't know, plant some trees or some shrubbery or something like that. Any luck with those? Is that a good idea, bad idea? What do you think?
Yeah, and a lot of the designs and some of the daycares, I've done hundreds of designs on daycare facilities Uh, and you run into a lot of situations where the municipality doesn't allow certain things on certain sides of the property, or you have utilities running down an entire line that you're trying to protect kids on the playground on the other side of that utility run that's underground, and you can't put a guardrail or bollards because it's not feasible with what's underground. And so we come up with some things that are more of a deterrent. Um, you're never going to crash test a boulder because it's not it's not the exact same boulder every time, set in the exact same type of soil and position and everything else. But there are definitely deterrents. And I have surrounded playgrounds with, 42-inch high by 42-inch wide boulders that are 30 inches deep. They're set into concrete in the ground 10 inches. It's not a guarantee it's going to stop a vehicle, but it sure isn't going to allow that vehicle to run over it.
Yeah.
It's not going to turn that into a rolling ball either. I mean, that you're talking about a couple tons of stone set in concrete in the ground. You're probably going to stop that car or slow it down substantially before it gets any further than that point. And then making sure that the spacing is correct. I've also run into playgrounds and schools that have attempted to put that type of thing around their facilities and their playgrounds, but they don't take into consideration the angles at which the traffic is coming. They don't take into consideration the spacing in between those barriers, and so it almost becomes ineffective, because if you're placing boulders 10 feet apart, you're opening yourself up to an opportunity in multiple areas for a car to end up getting between your barrier. So paying attention to some of those details rather than just dropping something in place and thinking that you're offering protection.
Well, and I would think, and is the leading practice to make sure whatever you're putting down, like if it's a boulder or a big landscaping type rock or something, is the leading practice to have that somehow concrete and anchored to the ground? I mean, I guess I'm just worried, like you don't want to put some kind of a rock or a boulder and then have that turn into a projectile, because that probably is not a great day either, right?
Yeah, that's why the size of it. I've mostly dealt with about a 42-inch face to the rock and a 30-inch depth.
Okay.
And that usually provides enough substance and size and weight that it's not going to turn into a projectile.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sure somewhere there's like a physics class that I don't remember where we talked about mass and inertia and all these
Right,
big words that
right.
we haven't used since high school, but that makes some sense. What about like shrubbery, trees, bushes, those types of things? Does that help at all? I mean, I guess if you got a massive, 500-year-old redwood, I suppose that's going to stop something. But what about our kind of traditional ones that we go out to the nursery and buy?
Unless a tree has got a girth of about 6 or 8 inch in circumference on it, um, shrubbery, bushes, that type of thing does relatively nothing to stopping a vehicle. Um, I've seen some of these locations, even with a uh, shrubbery and bushes that run many feet deep. The car is still gone directly through it and hit the building, regardless of the amount of bushes that were there.
Okay.
So unless you've got a tree with some girth to it, and I like to say 8 inches in circumference is about what we would look at as saying, okay, that is likely going to act very similar to something like a bollard and stop a vehicle from moving forward. then we would incorporate that tree or those trees into the design and the spacing with other items for the protective barrier.
So we've got kind of that natural, boulders, trees, those types of things. As you mentioned, the spacing obviously very important. If we start to kind of go up a rung, I would assume the bollards, and correct me if I'm wrong, I would assume the bollards, are probably the gold standard. Is that true? Like if you want to be the best you can be, the answer is concrete bollards, and that's about the best that's out there. Or is there something that's an intermediate step? I've seen a lot of places, gosh, ever since 9/11 they put up these massive like concrete flower boxes and these types of decorative things. But especially where I'm at here in Washington D.C., every federal building's got these massive concrete decorative planters in front of them.
Yeah.
I'm assuming those are probably going to stop the car, or at least
Yeah.
damage them pretty good.
They're expensive and there's maintenance, and there's a downside to those as well. But yes, they definitely are going to stop a vehicle, but they're costly, and you're going to have maintenance with all that concrete and the landscaping within it. So long term, it's not always the most cost efficient way to go.
So if I'm a small program, limited budget, maybe the big boulders, the trees, maybe something I'm considering. Is there another kind of small step up that's not going to necessarily break the bank, but can still be effective, somewhere between trees and rocks and bollards?
I
Wire systems, maybe?
well, the cabling system, but again, it's used in very specific applications.
Okay. So then maybe the guardrail is kind of the next step up, I suppose, on the cost scale.
Yeah, the guardrail is usually about the least expensive. It's a readily available material all over the country. It's stocked all over the country. It's very easy to get. The downside is the amount of holes that have to be dug for the spacing between the vertical support posts that the guardrail mounts on can sometimes cause an issue if you have a lot of trees or roots or utilities or other things in the way. It's not always feasible to run 25, 50, 100-foot guardrail run in some of these applications.
And what is kind of the thought process? Is it best to build these, barriers out kind of away from the fence of the playground, away from the building, or is it okay to just add them on to your existing fence or existing building, or does it not really matter? I mean, some folks have a lot of space, other folks don't have much space, so it's just kind of a mixed bag, and
Well,
you do the best you
if
can.
they're installing a crash tested bollard,
Yep.
you run into a lot of these. A lot of businesses will have a steel pipe with concrete poured in it installed. They'll throw a cover over it to make it look pretty, and they'll think that they're protecting their place. If that steel pipe with the concrete poured in it hasn't been tested and rated and given some sort of a rating to stop a vehicle, it really isn't going to do anything. You look at some of these. To give you an example, these EV charging stations are popping up all over the place.
Sure, sure.
The majority of them are dropping a steel pipe 18 inches in the ground, pouring some concrete in, and putting a nice colorful bollard cover over the top of it. And 18 inches, or in some cases 12 inches away from where they install this steel pipe, they've got a $150,000 transformer. It's pointless. Don't even put the steel pipe in the ground. You're doing absolutely nothing to protect any of your assets. If you don't put a crash test rated bollard in place in front of those $150,000 transformers, you might as well not put anything at all and just let the car hit the transformer. I had a daycare that I had reached out to where a gentleman had a medical emergency. He hit the gas instead of the brake on his Ford F-150. He went over the curb stop He went over the 8-inch curb in front of the curb stop. He went up a 45% incline on the grass, and then continued 50 yards into and all the way through the building.
Oh my.
So I got on the phone with the program director. I presented to their board what some solutions, some cost-effective solutions were, because this was not a big chain. This was a local, privately owned facility. So they didn't have a ton of money to spend. I incorporated not only the bollards, but boulders and other things that could keep the costs down in order to provide the protection around the playground and the front and side of their building. And they came back to me and said that they had one of the fathers who worked in construction donated a bunch of steel pipes, and they were going to install the steel pipes and concrete to protect the building and the playground. If I'm an insurance company, after having that F-150 do what it did, I don't know if I want to be providing business insurance to that place of business.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's foreseeable. It's already happened once, right? So,
Correct. Correct.
I don't know. Now's the time to be skimping on,
Right.
a few pennies there to save. Wow,
Right.
that's so obviously what we're gaining here is that like the ballards really do matter. Is there an organization you keep kind of saying like, are they tested? Are they certified? Who would kind of test those and certify that? How do you know if you're putting in a ballard, you're getting the right one, and what are the questions to ask if you want to go down this route?
So typically, any of the companies that produce, manufacture, or supply the crash tested bollards have had the bollards tested by a third party like CalSpan. And there's a number of them out there, but that's the first one that comes to the top of my head, where they run all the rigorous testing on those bollards using different weighted vehicles, different applications, different depths of concrete, different size cylinders for the concrete for the bollards to go into. Is it a 10-inch cylinder, a 12-inch cylinder, a 15-inch cylinder, at what speeds and what weight? And after all that testing is done, and it's a very, very rigorous testing, and there's a lot of physics and a lot of detail that they generate from that testing before they will release to a company to approve their product as something that will stop a vehicle based on a particular application. So these companies that are providing the product, if the product is crash test and rated, it's been done by a third party, and that's typically what you want if you are expecting to stop a vehicle and you're going to spend the money to have that installed.
Okay, well that's good to know, especially if you're going to go down the route. Let's make sure we do it and we do it the right way, because heaven forbid you cut a corner or get a contractor who doesn't know this area very well, and they give you something that isn't going to actually meet your needs here, right? So,
Yeah.
just a couple questions come to mind again. Like, so if I'm listening to this saying, wow, this is a big problem. Wow. Looking at my place, I've done my assessment, that John was talking about. We're kind of vulnerable here. I'd like to do something. Obviously new construction, that's super easy because you can build this into the plans, the blueprints, the design, all that. What about retrofitting? Do you do a lot of retrofits? Is this something that's capable of being retrofitted? Can we do this to existing structures, or what does that process look like?
Yeah, in fact, almost all of my work has been done on retrofits, taking an existing building and you go back to talking about costs. You don't have to come up with $1 million today to start protecting your 20, 30, 40 facilities. Some of the first steps involved have to do with looking at the property and assessing the risk. Now, there's a cost associated with that. You're providing a risk assessment and evaluating the property or properties of a business, but you don't even know what it is you're going to need until you begin the assessment process. So instead of some of these companies that may not be your kinder cares of the world, and maybe they have 20 locations, they're trying to figure out, how do I protect my facility without dropping millions of dollars into a program? That's where my company, Project Core, I have a number of different steps that I work with the client on, that they don't have to come up with all this money up front to start at least start the process. Start the risk assessment process, evaluate your properties, look at your vulnerabilities, find out what locations may be much more vulnerable than others. We've developed on some of these companies that we've worked with algorithms that kind of rate a site as being a highly vulnerable site to a very low vulnerability, and then coming up with how many of those on the high vulnerability level do we have, and then coming up with how much money can we look at budgeting next year to start protecting some of these high vulnerability sites that we have. So there's a lot of steps involved, and you just starting with the risk assessment. And I'd like to interject something here with risk assessment. There's an awful lot of insurance companies that provide their own risk assessment. The issue that I have with that is they do not have the customer, the client, the facility's best interest in mind when they are doing those risk assessments. You need to use a third-party risk assessment to assess your property as to the vulnerabilities, that does not have any money or any. I don't have any skin in the game. These insurance companies that provide these risk assessments to their businesses, there's an awful lot of times that there is exposure that is left even after they've assessed a property, because it wasn't done properly, and because they cut corners, or they were trying to find ways to save money in doing it. If you're going to do it, you want to do it right. Make sure that you don't have any holes, and you want to do your best to make sure that protection is foolproof as best as you can get it. Just starting off on some of these things, like doing the risk assessments and building on a program to determine where are you most vulnerable, what sites do you need to really be looking at as opposed to others, is a first step.
Yeah, absolutely. And Rob graciously agreed to provide 100 free risk assessments to our listeners. So if you are in need, Rob can get you started. He can, work with you. He can do that for free for you. So please reach out. We'll put you in touch with him, because as Ken is saying, that's kind of the first step. Be aware of your blind spots. Be aware of what your vulnerabilities are here. Ken, have you seen any incentives, any grants, any subsidies, any kind of, insurance company saying, hey, we'll give you a break, or we'll help you fund this, or anything like that that's been available for this issue?
I can't say insurance companies. I can't say, because I don't have specific hard evidence that they've reduced or helped reduce business insurance to people that have provided protection to their buildings or facilities. I do know that I have heard that is a possibility. That is something that they do look at. Obviously, if your place is protected, you're a lower risk. They may give you some break or reduce some of your costs in terms of your business insurance. But I'm not an insurance expert. I can't say that I know for sure how or what that looks like. As far as grants and requirements by municipalities and things of that nature, that's where I think that it really needs to start. It has to start with the architect, the engineer who's stamping plans. It has to start at the beginning with the rules and laws that go along with building a place that's going to have 100 children a day in it. They're going to have X number of cars coming through a parking lot a day. You look at that June Fall River, Massachusetts truck that went into the daycare, and there were a number of people injured. There may have been some fatalities in that particular one. They have 90 students enrolled in their daycare. If you look at how that breaks down, that's 180 cars daily dropping off and picking up children.
Yeah.
It's 900 cars a week, 3,600 a month, 43,200 a year. That's 43,000 opportunities that business has exposed themselves to the potential of a vehicle hitting it and injuring staff or children.
Wow.
That's
Yeah,
when you look at it
yeah.
from that perspective. If I'm an insurance company, I'm going to hope that company that place of business has got some protection around their building. And I
Yeah, at
sure
that
hope
point, it's
that
just it's a numbers game, isn't it? It's not a matter of if,
sure,
it's
it's
a
not
matter of
if, it's
when. I
when.
mean, yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
And that's why I think that it's so critical that it starts with some laws and the legal system and the municipalities putting more and more emphasis on how these places are built and protected. Right here in Chicago, we had very recently we had a car hit the gas and run through the front doors of a Portillo's restaurant with fatalities. And now the municipality is looking into not just that Portillo's in their area. They're looking at all the other restaurants and all the other storefronts that have exposure, and they're looking at making it mandating it and requiring it within a certain period of time for these businesses to install some sort of protection. Well, why did it take a car going through the front door and injuring and killing a number of people before these places are looking at implementing and installing these?
Well, yeah, because you've already kind of got a model there. All the you think about like your gas meter, all that's had to have been protected for years, right? So I mean,
Yeah.
you can't have unprotected gas meters in parking lots and other places. So you almost, I mean, now granted, some of that's just I guess metal or whatever you're putting around it. It's not necessarily bollards, but there's certainly precedent for doing this for a couple different things I can think of, right?
Yeah, I mean, I look at I don't like to name businesses, but look at some of these very, very large chains like some of these coffee shops, and they throw these little aluminum fences around the front of their building and drop 10 tables and chairs in the front, and they've got hundreds of cars going in and around that little aluminum fence on a daily basis with absolutely zero protection for anyone sitting at those tables. There's a nationwide ice cream shop. Its basic design is parking and driving on three sides of its building. All three sides of the building are built with ground to roof glass, and the front and sides have benches for sitting and eating your ice cream, fully exposed to all traffic in all directions on all sides of their building. It doesn't make any sense.
No, not when you look at it from this lens, it certainly doesn't. Wow. Yeah, I never even thought about that. I mean, but it's a great example, especially, you think about the even just going through the drive-through and how often are we distracted drivers because, we spilled our coffee or we dropped a French fry or we didn't get our credit card back or we're not sure if we got, our change properly. I mean, it's a really valid point. And certainly, if you think about the early childhood environment, we definitely suffer from distracted driving a lot, especially parents that are, maybe sleep deprived to begin with, or maybe they're trying to juggle, multiple children. That's just an environment that's really ripe for distraction. So, yeah, doing a little bit here seems to make a heck of a lot of sense.
Even trying to do something, another application that we had to install bollards because of ADA and the depth of the sidewalk. We were unable at this particular site to install the bollards in the concrete. So we ended up sticking them right behind the sidewalk in the landscaping.
Hmm.
And we increased the size of the circumference of the concrete um, support that was holding the bollard when we stuck it into the landscaping. Now, there was no crash test rating done on this. There never will be a crash test rating because soils and sands and clays all over the country are different. So you're not going to be able to determine whether or not you're going to stop something. But the bottom line is the daycare saw the need for some sort of protection. And they thought, if we can't get it into concrete, we'll increase the diameter of the sonotubes that we're putting the bollards in. We'll put them into the landscaping. And at the very least, we can try and minimize or mitigate if someone does happen to go up over the curb, the wheels stop in the sidewalk. 24 hours after we did that installation, a lady was walking down the sidewalk with her stroller, went into the front door. Within seconds, a car came around and pulled in at the front door, hit the gas instead of the brake, went up over the curb in the sidewalk, hit the bollard that was in the landscaping, and it stopped it from going in the front doors to the daycare where the lady and the stroller had just entered.
Huh.
So again, it's not something that was crash test rated, but it prevented an accident. It prevented a serious accident from happening.
Wow. I mean, that family doesn't know how lucky they were. That's crazy, Ken. I mean,
Yeah, and it was all caught on videotape because they had cameras on top of the building over the parking lot, so you could actually see the lady walking with the stroller go in the front door. 2 seconds later, the car goes up over the curb and hit the bollard that was installed the day before.
wow. Oh my goodness. Well, somebody was looking out for them, huh? My
Yeah.
goodness. So I know that, you probably aren't going to be able to answer specifically because things vary around the country in different applications. But if, you're a owner, director, and operator sitting here listening saying, okay, you got me sold, guys. This makes sense. I can't believe I didn't think of it before. This is a big vulnerability. It's a gap. I'd like to do something, make my program safer. Can you give us a ballpark, an estimate, a range of, what am I looking at here? Am I looking at a few $100s? Am I looking at $1,000? Am I looking at $10,000? Like what would be kind of a smaller scale? I need to put in, I don't know, two, three, five ballards. I don't know. You do this way more than I do. What would be kind of a reasonable amount to say, hey, for $5,000 or whatever, we can make this problem go away? What would that kind of look like? Just so folks get a sense of budget and that kind of stuff.
Don't hold me to it, but if you want to use a nice round number, $1,500 a bollard.
Okay. All right. So, I mean, that's,
Fifteen,
it's not
fifteen,
insurmountable,
sixteen
right?
hundred
I mean,
dollars a bollard, and whether you're doing 5 or 50, these guys that I work with across the country have been doing this for so long that it doesn't really matter how many there are. So you're not saving a whole lot of money by skimping on not providing the protection by doing what you need to do. Um, whether there's 5 bollards or 50. I mean, these guys usually can come in and get out of your site within about 2 or 3 days, and you have fully protected your building.
wow. And what, in terms of like additional cost, ongoing cost, I mean, these are pretty much cement, right? A concrete. Like there's not a lot of upkeep and maintenance to these, I wouldn't think.
No, there's not. They're typically put in below the concrete is poured below the frost line, so you're not dealing with upward erosion of the bollards in places like Chicago. Um, and so once these things go in and these protective sleeves are basically waterproof, you really don't have any maintenance.
Hmm. So kind of a one-time cost, really.
Yeah.
And then I would assume, and again, it's, we're speaking kind of general here because every location jurisdiction is going to be different, but is there a role for like the city planners, permits, like people come out and kind of approve this normally, I would think, or maybe not necessarily, who knows?
It's really all over the board.
Okay.
It really I've worked in states and cities and jurisdictions where they're like, you want to install a what? Yeah, we don't even have anything like that in our books.
Hmm.
Do whatever you want to do, protect whatever you want to protect. And then you get places. I've got some places down in Florida. There's 6 different departments involved in signing off and approving putting this protection in place between, the landscaping department want to make sure that, it doesn't affect any of the landscaping. You got the planning department wants to make sure that all ADA and everything else is met. And so it's all over the board. There is no rule of thumb as to whether or not a municipality is going to run you through the hoops or just tell you to go do what you got to do, and they don't care. I've had it both ways.
Well, it makes sense. I mean, local government's so different across the country. It did seem like you kind of referenced a couple of things to just have on your radar before, right? So if you're installing this and it's interfering or impeding on a sidewalk, that may make things a little bit more complicated because we're worried about, wheelchair access and ADA, American with Disability Act, and
Yes.
even operations of the childcare. You don't want to put all these bollards and have people can't bring their strollers in to pick up the
Right.
kids, right? So,
Right.
in those cases, I know you referenced one where you put it in the landscaping bed. I would assume if you're putting this in the parking lot or the asphalt, may be easier than on the sidewalk in some cases. And again, I'm trying to be very general, but just kind of things to think outside the box or give folks some ideas about ways they could maybe implement this at their programs.
Yeah, a lot of the site assessment and the design discussion around a particular site is taken into consideration. When you get into your northern states and you've got a lot of snow plows in these parking lots, and they're knocking over curb stops and such. You don't like the drop of bollard in the asphalt because it just creates one more barrier for something to get hit or a plow to run into. So you try and get them up into the sidewalk. If you've got restrictions on width or depth of particular parking lots, if you got tight quarters, again, that's something where you can't get it into the asphalt. You got to try and get it up into the sidewalk or closer to the building. And areas, a lot of the Texas locations, they've got their areas are a lot more spread out. So you can drop those bollards out into the parking area much easier than you can in some place like Michigan.
Okay.
So region has a lot to do with it too.
So if you're thinking, gold standard, if I want to be like the best protected, the best at this, the leading practice in the field, it would be depending on, again, your size, your layout, what you can do. But sounds like it would really be the ballards would be the best level of protection. And thinking about kind of the places to protect, it sounds like the front door, the entryways, the building itself, and then even going out to the playground if the assessment reveals that may be vulnerable from a car potentially getting close or hitting it, right? I mean, so would that kind of be leading practice if you wanted to do the best you possibly could, the child care program on the hill approach?
Yeah, yes. We've got some new products that are in testing that have to do with bollards for around the playground that are incorporated into the fence post system and the chain link system. And those are installed in very similar way that the typical bollards up at the front of a school and the concrete might be installed. But there's a few modifications to it. Again, it's not something that is, I don't believe that they have anything that is 100% foolproof on the market today, but you take a regular chain link fence compared to some of these bollard fence products that they are coming out with and doing some testing on, and you are definitely going to stop a car a lot easier with one of these systems than you are with a standard chain link fence.
Huh. Well, that's really interesting. So, I mean, if you're in the process of thinking like, oh, I got to redesign my playground or it's time for a new fence, or, I've even seen some jurisdictions saying, hey, nowadays the 5 foot fence doesn't cut it anymore. You need a minimum 8 foot, 10 foot fence. So you may have to do it for just licensing requirements or whatever have you to begin
Right.
with. So maybe there's some of these new technologies that are coming out that maybe we're taking a look at because you get kind of killed two birds with one stone here, huh?
Yeah, and if you're removing and replacing existing, many of these municipalities don't even require a permit. You're taking down an existing fence, you're putting up a new fence in the same place.
Hmm.
Now it's beefed up and it's, you know, a different application, but it's a fence in the same place as the fence.
Huh. Well, that's good to know. Have you seen other things kind of coming into play as far as like building construction of the actual buildings instead of doing, I don't know, 2x4 studs or something like embedding the concrete actually into the corners or into the entry points of the buildings, or is that something that's kind of still far off?
I think that's still kind of far off. I did run across a couple of uh, designs that they had incorporated into some buildings in Arizona, where they actually installed the crash tested bollards within the wall,
Hmm.
spaced accordingly for the crash test rating. And then the wall was built and stuccoed. So if a car hit that stucco wall, it was not going through the stucco.
Wow. Yeah. What? I mean,
Yeah, it was an interesting application, not something I've seen a lot of, no.
you kind of think, I mean, just speculating towards the future, I mean, you kind of wonder if hurricane prone places and even tornado prone places might see some of this in the future. I mean, just integrate it right in the building design and may make some
Yeah,
sense. I don't know.
yeah.
Um, hmm. Well, very interesting. Well, have you got any stories? I know you've shared a couple. Any stories where the proper design and this kind of stuff has really helped prevent a tragedy? Obviously, the one you shared just a few minutes ago was extraordinary. Any other things that you've seen in the news lately or different cases you've been involved with saying, wow, if they would have done A, B, or C differently, this would have been a different result? Or, gosh, I'm glad they did A, B, and C because look how it saved lives here. Anything like that kind of jump off the page at you?
Um, Not off the top of my head.
Okay, well, that's all right. I didn't know if you had any. I know we always kind of take a look at the news stories that come in, and I saw
Yeah, I'm
one
so
not
used
too
to
long
looking at
ago that we kind of
I'm
like,
so used to
man.
looking at the news stories where the accidents happen, not the preventable.
Well, and that's it too. I mean, you saw the one, and we kind of talked about rocks and boulders. I want to say, was it in Canada? I think I might have even emailed it to you. It was maybe in Canada where someone came through a playground, and again, you just saw those rocks and boulders that really they were so tiny. They weren't 42 inches or anything like you were talking about, but they actually, went flying through the air, and I think they even injured some people. So yeah, those
Yeah,
are
and then you
things like,
got that,
ah, geez.
you had that incident that happened in Chatham, Illinois. I believe they said that the lady who ran into that building that had after school children and teens in it, she went in one end of the building, all the way through the building and out the other end. She traveled 1,300 feet before she hit that building.
Wow.
So there was a tremendous amount of opportunity for something somewhere to have been out towards that road to have prevented her from coming that far into the property and then into and exiting the building. And there were 4 kids killed in that.
Wow. I mean, yeah, you're right. That's a tremendous runway, for lack of a better word.
Oh,
Um,
2 blocks, 2 city blocks.
yeah, right. Oh my goodness. Well, I mean, this has certainly opened my eyes. And every time I'm driving around, and I've got the privilege. I'm at childcare and Head Start programs every week, and now it's another thing that I'm thinking of when I'm pulling up to the building. Quite frankly, is gosh, what if I did have that, moment and I slipped and hit the gas instead of the brake, or I was distracted, or, all these types of things. And it's certainly been eye opening to explore this with, with Rob and with John, and of course with you as well. And I just can't thank you enough for all the work that you're doing and for being here and sharing your expertise. Any kind of final thoughts, words of advice, any last minute things you'd like to leave for people to ponder or think about?
I just think it's real important to keep the communication going, and even if the funding isn't readily available, to at least start the communication as to looking at how exposed your businesses are. I mean, no one wants a fatality. No one wants to have that experience, and it doesn't matter if you've got 10 kids in your daycare or 200 kids in your daycare. These accidents are happening across the country, no matter how big or small these buildings are. You get that many parents and people and grandparents coming in and out of these parking lots with cars. Like I had gone over, the 90 students in that one facility. That's 43,000 times a year. There's a potential opportunity for a car to have an accident. When you start looking at it in those terms and those numbers, you start thinking twice about how exposed am I?
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's it's crazy when you put some numbers to it. I mean, I don't think most people would even appreciate how many vehicles are coming in and out and the opportunity that has. And I certainly appreciate your viewpoint and all your work on this. And I hope everybody listening has really enjoyed the series here. I think it's a phenomenal opportunity to really look at some stuff that, we probably walk by every single day and never give a second thought to. But as we always say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, or whatever the saying is,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Much rather you be proactive on this, much rather you be thinking about this. As Ken has mentioned, there is some real cost-effective ways to do this. And certainly would encourage you to reach out and look at the experts here. We are building an entire website on this, so we'll have a tremendous amount of real world stories that have happened, lessons learned from those stories, resources, and of course, Rob's very generous offer to conduct 100 free assessments, which I hope that everybody takes advantage of. And in this case, knowledge really can be power. So, Ken, I really thank you for joining us, and thank you for all you do on an everyday basis to protect those kiddos. I'll give you the final word here, sir.
I'd be open to hearing from anyone. I think I have developed quite a passion for this. It's something that everywhere I go, and I travel the country quite often, and not just daycares, but any storefronts, any facilities. I am always looking at probably looking at these sites through a different lens than most people. And I think that a lot of these companies also don't realize how much is actually involved in putting something together in order to create a program to provide the protection for their facilities. And one of the things that I do specialize in is onboarding contractors and dealing with the property management companies and leases, and understanding the legalities as to what is and isn't allowed in certain areas, and the design and permitting processes. So there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot of preparation and work behind the scenes that has to go into this before you have the truck and the crew and the 15 bollards show up on site.
Well, fantastic. Well, Ken, tell folks, how can they get a hold of you? How can they reach out if they have questions? What's the best way to track you down?
Best way is the website, projectcore.com, projeccore.com.
There you go,
Kind of lists out
projectcore.com.
a bunch of the services that we offer. Can offer a full package, a partial package, one portion of the package. I work with a lot of different of the product suppliers around the country. There's a couple of that I work with more than others that I have put on my website, just because have really come accustomed to using and liking their product and how easy and effective their product is. But I don't own or operate any of the product that I manage the installation of. So I will cater and work with a customer or client to whatever their needs are and search out and find the right application for that.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing your expertise. Now you've got a great resource, everybody. If you need some help, you got some questions, Ken is the man. Please visit him. Please take advantage of the great expertise that he offers. And I do want to say thank you so much for everybody taking part of this three-part series. We hope that you found it useful. We hope that you found it educational and informative. And really do appreciate you joining us on these podcasts. If there's topics that you'd like to see us dive deeper into, please reach out. Always looking for new content. If you'd like to be a speaker, if you've got a topic you'd like to talk about that you're passionate about, again, reach out. This is really all about supporting us in the early childhood industry and in our field. And we know now more than ever, we need each other. So this is Andy Roszak saying thank you for being here very much. Thank you to Rob. Thank you to John. Thank you to Ken for all their time and their expertise. And I look forward to seeing you on one of the next versions of our Early Childhood Chats podcast. For now, stay safe out there, and we'll talk to you again real soon.